Okay, so this is the video on the independent samples t-test. So you can find this document that you see right there on Canvas, and that's the problem that we're going to be working with. And you can also find some other information about the test on Canvas as well. But this is different than the single sample t-test because with the independent sample t-test, we are comparing the means of two independent samples to determine if they're different from one another. So this is a between subjects design. So what that means is when we say that there are two independent samples, we have two groups and each participant in the study is in one and only one of the groups. Okay, so it's essentially, again, a between subjects design, and that's why it's called an independent samples t-test, because we're comparing two independent samples to one another. Okay, so we are going to continue with the example of the effect of beta blockers on traumatic memory. So in the second study, you'll recall that in the last study, right, the psychologist did a single sample t-test. Well, this is a follow-up study. So as you can read along here, after the results of the first study, the psychologist wants to further test the drug that is designed to block traumatic memories with a more controlled experiment. She gives a control group of 10 veterans a placebo, so they get no drug, and in real life they would get some type of drug. It would be a non-active drug. Okay, so but you get the idea that the placebo group is the control group. Okay, so she gives 10 veterans who have PTSD or traumatic memories a placebo and measures their level of stress on a 10-point scale, 10 being the highest on the scale, 1 being the lowest, and you can see their scores there. She then gives the actual drug to the experimental group of veterans and measures their level of stress on a 10-point scale, and they have the following scores there. And of course, the research question is, does the drug have a significant effect on traumatic memories? Okay, so let me show you how to actually do the test, and we'll go to SPSS here where I've already set up the data file. What's important to note about this data file is that you have two columns of data, and the first column is a grouping variable. Okay, so this is similar to the lesson that we had on how to enter data into SPSS. I showed you how to do a grouping variable there. But you can see that our first 10 participants are in the control group, right? Here are their scores, right, where it says score. And here's the group. Okay, this is their grouping variable, so they get a 1. The treatment group, they get a 2, and here are their scores. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. So essentially what you're doing is you're telling the computer that these participants here belong to the control group, and these participants here belong to the treatment group. Okay, so the grouping variable, the test will not work correctly unless you have a grouping variable in SPSS. So let's go to variable view real quick, and you can see that for the first variable I've named it group, and I put in the values. 1 is the control group, 2 is the treatment group, and that is a nominal variable. And then our second variable is score, and we don't need to put in values because it is not a nominal variable, it is a scale variable, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, and that's what it looks like. Pretty straightforward. So let's actually go to analyze the data. We're going to go to analyze, compare means, independent sample t-test. Okay, we are going to bring group over to our grouping variable, and we're going to click on define groups. And group 1, we gave them a 1, and group 2, we gave them a 2. Okay, so this is a step that you absolutely have to take for the analysis to work correctly. And then we are going to bring our dependent variable over in the test variable box, and we are going to click OK. And that's basically all there is to it. So you'll see that here we have the mean for the control group and the standard deviation and the standard error. For the treatment group, we have the mean and the standard deviation. So just by looking at the means, which is the first thing you should do when you after you run a test, you can see that participants in the control group have higher stress levels than participants in the treatment group. Okay, 7.6 compared to 3.7. So you'll recall that on our scale of measurement, a higher score equals more stress. So what this means is that the drug does seem to be effective. At least it seems to be working in the predicted direction. So if you look down here in your output, you'll see the mean difference is 3.9. Okay, that's simply 7.6 minus 3.7. That tells you there's a difference of 3.9 points between the two groups. Okay, so that's the mean difference. You see that we have a t-value of 3.98. Degrees of freedom is 18. And this is statistically significant. Okay, so this is less than 0.05. It's actually 0.001. So the test is statistically significant. So again, not only is there a difference between these two groups, but it's a meaningful difference. It's a significant difference. In other words, we can, for the most part, rule out that these results are caused by chance. Okay, so let's go back to our document here, and here I have provided an example of how to write up a proper answer for the independent sample t-test. That should say independent. An independent samples t-test was conducted to determine if administering beta blocker drugs significantly reduced the level of stress reported by veterans compared to control group participants. The results revealed that the average level of reported stress in the treatment group was 3.7 with a standard deviation of 2.31. Was significantly less than that reported in the control group, who had a mean of 7.6 with a standard deviation of 2.31, and here I say T 18 degrees of freedom equals 3.98, P is equal to 0.001, and then here I provide an index of effect size. There's two ways to do it, using Cohen D or R, Pearson's R. We'll talk more about effect size in class, but there are effect size calculators online where you can very quickly calculate the effect size. Cohen's D is actually a fairly simple formula, so you could easily do it by hand as well. So that is it for the independent sample t-test. Remember, the two important things here is that you are comparing the means of two independent groups. Okay, so this is a between subjects design. Each participant is in one and only one of the two conditions. And insofar as your analysis is concerned, you must have a grouping variable in SPSS. Okay, so those are the two kind of distinct things to remember about this test. And that's it for now. We'll see you next time.